Welcome back to episode 17 of Chambers Chatter. We're your host. I'm Laura Chambers-Babelis.
And I'm Shae Chambers-Helms. Today we're super excited to introduce Jody Henson to the show. He's a longtime Beaufortonian, a war veteran, and we can't wait to share his stories and experiences with you.
We are so excited to have you today. We can't wait to hear all of your stories.
Well, you have to ask me. On the questions. It's nice to be here. It's really a pleasure. As I said, you're getting into the minor leagues when you start bringing people like me in after having all your other guests that I've known most of them and for a long time. Yeah. And especially Claude recently. He was a good friend.
So you moved here as a teenager. What was that like?
I moved here at the beginning of my sophomore year in 1962. We had come from Meridian, Mississippi. My father was in the Marine Corps. He was a pilot, and this was my 9th state and 14th city to live in those 14 years of my life. At that time, I turned 15 that year in October. And we actually lived in Pigeon Point, where we are right now. My wife and I are there. That was our first house, and it was a great place to be. It was the last house on Pigeon Point Road. And at that time, my sister and I have a younger sister, Cheryl. She's the best friend I ever had.
Oh.
We would go crabbing every day for my mother. I don't like crabs myself. I would eat the claws, I guess, if you look at it that way. She picked the bodies. But I met so many Beaufort people living in Pigeon Point, a lot of the kids that I went to school with. And I met people like Beaufort Austin. Can I drop names?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and Emmett Paul. They were a year older than I, well, Beaufort was probably a couple years older. Emmett was a year ahead of me in school. And they had this black and yellow Plymouth, about 1959 Plymouth, that they pulled their trailer, their little boat trailer with. And I would see them every day coming back from doing crab pots and learning a little bit about the Beaufort life. And one day they came back, and those guys were laughing so hard. I couldn't figure out what in the world was going on. And Beaufort was on the bow of the boat, on the edge of the boat, just kind of keeping it tipped over this way. And they were laughing, and they finally came around where I could see the side of the boat, and they had Emmett was driving. He had hit a buoy, not paying attention. And there was a hole in the side of that boat about that big. It wasn't quite all the way to the water line, but he was leaning over enough to keep it from getting sinking and everything like that. But so that was my introduction to Beaufort people and things like that. And my sister and I, as we grew up, we used to do a lot of movies. Our parents would pack us off to the movie, I guess. Military housing usually had a base movie on a theater on the base, so you could take and sometimes catch a bus. And I went to the Breeze Theater the first time, remember that? My sister and I walked downtown from Pigeon Point. I guess that's 7 blocks.
Yeah.
Nice walk.
That was a good one.
And she was in the 7th grade, going into the 7th grade. And there, for the first time, I saw Beak Webb, Roger Pinckney, and let's see who it was. Linda, what was her name? Martin, who was Roger Pinckney's first wife. And Eddie Bellamy. Those 4 kids were thick as thieves. They'd probably grown up together. And I remember seeing them just before school started. We went to that movie. And then when I had my first home run class, I met them officially. And we had some great people. And I said my Beaufort High classmates are very precious.
Yeah. It is. There's something about the classmates you have. Yeah, there's something.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, even the schoolmates and everything like that. So.
Yeah.
And then we moved out to Laurel Bay, and we were there about 2 years. Had a lot of people come and go, just typical military.
Big difference from there at Pigeon Point.
Right, yeah. And this is where I got to know Pat Conroy a little bit, because he was 2 years ahead of me in high school, and his dad and my father were pilots in the Marine Corps.
Oh, and y'all were both at Laurel Bay at the same
time? We were
time?
at Laurel Bay. He was, the way the housing was, the back of his house was just down a little ways from us. I didn't really know him very well because he was a senior and I was a sophomore. I think he had a sister that was in my class, and I didn't really get to know her very well because I think his dad transferred at the end of that year. But I remember his father had an old car that was a typical squadron commander's car with the squadron insignia painted on the side of this 1951 Plymouth or whatever it was. I remember it was a Bumblebee with a bomb underneath it. And he was in an A4 squadron. But the kids there were great. And it was like our own little place. That was the only disadvantage to living in Laurel Bay versus the friends that lived in in Pigeon Point or over here in Hermitage area. And they got to see more of each other, because once you got on the housing area out there, you were just kind of locked in. You didn't come to town. We didn't have, it was too young to be driving at that time to come to town. So I loved coming to school on Monday mornings to hear what all my friends did over the weekend, the hunting trips, the camping trips down to Fripp or Capers or Little Capers or wherever they may have gone, Fritcher's Island. And I said, God, I wish I could do that. But it was fun.
Yeah.
And they were great kids. And it was a great school. And in those days, some of the other people, like Gene Norris was a wonderful guy. He and my sister became very close friends because they taught school together when she finally finished high school. And, of course, he and Pat were very good friends. And I have a classmate, Roy Reed. The three of them spent a lot of time together when Roy would come to Beaufort. And Gene was just a terrific guy, and everybody loved him. And that was a big loss. I used to go by his house on North Street there once in a while and talk to him when we came to town. When we came back to town. But it was just a great place to grow up. And unfortunately, I didn't get to do a lot of those things those kids did. But my dad and I, we hunted and fished. He liked to do that. So whenever he had time off, we would go hunting or fishing. And met some really good people that way. And you always meet good people when you're hunting and fishing. But in those days, there was a fellow by the name of Maurice Burns who ran Clarendon Plantation. And Laurel Bay was right on Clarendon Plantation, right next to it. And he and my father became good friends, so we got invited out there to hunt.
Oh, that's pretty stunning.
And fish. Because I could count on my dad to find us a good connection for hunting and fishing. But it was just a terrific place.
Yeah, I mean, so much so you've saved you your whole life, so.
As a student, I probably wasn't the best student, and I did finish with honors, but I did finish school. And I tell the story. My wife doesn't like me to tell this story, but I was talking to Pat Conroy one day, getting some of his books signed, and going by to see him. And I remember his first book when it came out. The Great Santini came out. He was in Columbia, where we were living at the time, and running upstairs at the J.B. White store to get Pat to sign his book. And at the top of the stairs was Colonel Conroy. And I just blew right by me. I never thought about getting him to sign my book. He said, Jody Glenn, a couple of the guys were with me, come on up here and get Pat's book. He was really shucking it for him. But with those kind of connections and those kind of memories are great. I wasn't real close to Pat. We used to play football together in Laurel Bay. We had a lot of football games, touch and some tackle. And this was with no pads or anything like that. But he was an older student, and he had his friends, older kids out there. And but so we didn't see an awful lot. But we used to keep up with him a little bit over the years. But then when I finished school, the first year I went to the University Extension here, as they called it then. And I had 1 year here, and I didn't do very well. And the university asked me to take a break. Why don't you take a semester off? Now, this is 1966, 1967, 66. And so I said, God, the draft's going around. I've got to go back to, I've got to get in college. So I had a bunch of friends that went to Bruton Parker Junior College in Mount Vernon, Georgia. And so I filled out an application and told us this is a Baptist, it's a church school, that my father made $10,000 a month. And I got in just like that. I said, maybe that helped. I don't know what kind of money my father made.
That's so funny.
I was grasping at straws, trying to go ahead and get a place in college so I could stay out of the draft.
Yeah.
And so I went there that year, and there was 4 or 5 of us from Beaufort here, and we used to drive down 5 o'clock on Monday mornings. We dropped one off at Georgia Southern, and then the other 4 of us went on to Bruton Parker. And I did very well that year. And then I'm home. It was in March. I actually went for my physical in January of 67. And then in March I was home, and I was at the Shack Drive-In. And I know all the people have mentioned the Shack Drive-In that you've had, most of the people that knew it. And I have a print that a friend of mine made, a high school classmate. I actually have the sign, the Shack Drive-In. I've got the only one. She says, now I've got the rights to this picture. And anytime you want it back, Kathy, to make cards or whatever, I'll let you have it, but it hangs in my living room right now. But it's
I'd love
the
to
shack.
have a picture of
And
that.
it's a great picture.
Please send us a picture.
And so I told them that this is the place that you came before you picked up your date, and you met the guys. Then you went and got your date, and you brought her back to the shack to meet with the guys and the other girls. Then you went on your date, which was usually either the Green Lawn Drive-In or Bailey's, what we call Bailey's, the Oak Grove, which is out in Okeechobee. That was the place to go dancing. Or if somebody had a party. But it was usually those three things. Then you came back after that event, you brought your girlfriend or your date back, and you got them. The girls would like to get a virgin bubble up, was what they like to get, with 3 or 4 cherries, 5 cherries, whatever they want. It was a soda drink, it was a soft drink. And then you got a hamburger or whatever. Then you took them home, and then you came back.
Oh my God.
And you met the guys after your dates, because we usually had later curfews or no curfews. And you just stayed there listening to WLS out of Chicago. Somebody turned on their car radio.
Oh my God.
Because Jacksonville wasn't coming in. The Big Ape wasn't coming in that late that night. But WLS played great music. And music of that day anyway. And it was just the place. And then and that was Friday night.
And where was this?
The shack was right about where Starbucks is, in that area.
That's right.
In there.
Right.
And it was in the highway department was there. Actually, it might have even been a little further down from Starbucks. Okay. But it was near the highway department. Okay. And that was where everybody spun their wheels when they came out to see who could make the longest screech with their tires.
Oh
and
my
so on
gosh.
like that. But that was Friday night.
Image in my head right now.
And then Saturday, you either went hunting or you went to the beach, whatever you did. We're talking about the guys. And then you did it all over again on Saturday night, maybe with a different date or the same date. And you started over again, you did that routine. And that was your weekend, you know.
One night you went to the shack, at least 3 to 5 times?
Oh, that's about, if you started from the beginning, that was probably 5 times. You know, if you did all the circuits, you know, something like that, depending on how late it was. It was a great place. Edwin Campbell owned it in those days, and it was really good food. And just good camaraderie with all the students and the other kids. And older, you meet people that came home from college, older brothers that I had never met during high school. And they would come home, and you'd meet somebody's brother that was 2 or 3 years older than I was, or 4 years older.
And what year are we talking about right now?
Well, that would have been in 66, 65, 64, high school years. I finished high school in 65. Okay. And stayed here that first year, and actually the second year. And then when I was leading up to was in March of 1967, I'm at the shack with my date, who is my wife now. And she said, "You got some mail here?" And I said, "No, it's probably got my draft notice in it. I was just kidding around." So she pulls it out, and there's 2 or 3 things. My mom had left them in the car. And she says, "Well, you have something here from the President of the United States." And I said, Oh,
I just got goosebumps.
And that was my thank you. Come on in. The president calling for you to report. So I reported. I was supposed to report in July. So I did have a couple months. So I did get to finish school. So the first thing I did was that Monday, I went back to school and I went to the office and I told them that I had gotten my draft notice. And they said, I said, "Did you ever turn in my student classification?" Well, I found out they had never reported me as a student. So that whole second year, it was like a gamble, and they finally just caught up with me because he wasn't in college, according to the government, I guess, at that time. So I was going to appeal my thing. So in July, before I reported in July, I contacted Joyce, who ran the draft board, and I said, "Joyce, I want to appeal this draft." I said, "My college never sent off my student classification to get credit for this year." And they said, okay, so they scheduled me an appointment. So that was in early June, and I went down there, and I thought it was going to be pretty easy because there was a gentleman by the name of Ed Samuels who was the head of the board for the draft board, and he and my parents were very close friends. I had dated his daughter in high school, was one of our classmates, Pat Samuels. And I said, "Oh, he's going to just cut me loose here," like that. So we talked, and we went over everything, and then what it came down to was Mr. Samuel said, "Well, Jody, the problem is that you have 2 years of school, but you don't have 2 years worth of credit." And I didn't quite have 2 years worth of credit. And if I'd have been a good jailhouse lawyer, I would have said to Mr. Samuels, "Well, Mr. Samuels, I was only a student classified for 1 year, but I have more than 1 year's worth of credit.
Yeah.
So you should give me a break. But so
Hindsight.
I was supposed to report in July of '67 to go to Fort Jackson, meet at the bus downtown, and my mother gave me $25 to take the basic training with me. So I took my girlfriend, my wife now, to Savannah, and we splurged it all on dinner at the Pirate House, all $25 and more.
At the Pirate House.
At the Pirate's House. And so we came back. So the next morning, and my mother said, well, I'll take you down to the draft board. She told me that the night before. I said, no, I'll just walk down there. It was just 4 blocks from, we lived on that North Street in Rebo, almost on that corner.
Okay.
At that time.
Yeah.
And I went down there, and I got there, and Joyce said, Jody, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm reporting. She said, oh, we gave you an extra 30 days. You don't have to report until August. It's in the mail. Sure enough, so I walked on home, and I walked in the house. My mother was crying.
Yeah, the emotion.
And I said, well, I'm back. I said, I don't have to report for much. And she slapped me.
Oh!
And she said, I'm not giving you another $25 when you go the next time. She was just happy to see me for that time that I didn't go.
Oh,
but,
my gosh.
It was kind of a funny situation.
For the emotions that you went through, I'm sure. You're usually prepared to...
Hey, everything rolls off my back really in the long run. But I was glad to have that extra 30 days. And all I did was water ski and party for the next 30 days.
As you should have.
And Norman Jones had a boat that a friend of mine, Tillman Irwin, would borrow. And we would get in that. It was like a bateau with a motor in the middle of it. It's a big, heavy wooden boat. And we would water ski out in front and pick up kids that would come down to the dock. Somebody would wave you down. You'd take them out and put them on a slalom or a ski.
How fun.
And just do that. And then you went to the shack every night.
Back to the shack.
But in between there, that after I graduated from high school, and talking about the light earlier, my father bought the Oaks Plantation, which is out just on Chowan Creek.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that belonged to the Epps family, and his wife had been a Godley. The Godley farms were out there. And you may have known some of the Godley, they had Godley children, but so we bought that, my dad bought that house, and it was perfect. I could hunt and fish right there in my own yard. Quail hunting, dove hunting. We had some deer run through there, but I never shot any deer. But fishing in the creek, shrimping, crabbing. And I didn't really have to go anywhere, except when I went to town, but I was going to the extension in that time. And my dad actually ran the bowling alley for 1 year after he retired in '64.
Oh.
That was a job that I had with my father. On Sundays, I went and cleaned the bowling alley. I did all the lanes. And during that time, I could sneak a slice of apple pie that was up on top of the counter and get a Coke for nothing, and so like that. But my dad enjoyed that. He did that for 1 year, and then he went overseas to fly. He was a pilot, and he went to work for Air America, which was supposedly the airlines of the CIA, but he denied it till the day he died that was not part of the CIA. But there's a pretty significant book about that group on there. But and then when I did get drafted, and I went to Fort Jackson, and I'll go back to the light. We were talking about the lights, and I'll go back to my St. Helena days.
Yeah.
And my father had a friend that retired with him, and they bought a house just a couple of doors down from us. They had 2 children, my sister's age, and the daughter was a year younger than I was. And we went out to go see the light at Land's End 2 times. The second time is when we saw it. And I swear that light was coming, and that light was coming. There's nothing on that road. You can't turn off anywhere. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, today when I think back, it looked like it was pretty big.
I've seen it.
And all of a sudden, it just disappeared. So we cranked up the car, and we went down there to see what we could do. And we decided after that would be the last time we would go. We never went back. Now, my sister may have gone later.
I have to ask, so now you're supposed to knock on the church door. Did you have to do that?
No, we didn't do that.
I think they've elaborated the rules a little bit.
I don't know if we heard that. That might have come out later, but we went home.
You're supposed to knock 3 times on the door and then go sit underneath the oak tree is what you're supposed to do now to see it.
Okay, well, we've talked about it every once in a while. Maybe we should go back out there. Anita, my wife's Anita, and she grew up here from the 2nd grade on.
Oh, boy.
And she grew up in Pigeon Point, as a matter of fact. So she doesn't live where we are now, just 2 streets over where she grew up.
Oh, that's so
in
cool.
There. So, but Beaufort, and I've lived in 6 different houses in Beaufort. When I counted them the other day, just to think about it, and I said that's amazing.
Yeah.
And but when I went into the Army, I went to Fort Jackson, and then I got sent to Fort Gordon. and that's in Georgia. And I called my mother up to tell her I was there. And she said, I know. I said, Mom, how do you know I'm at Fort Gordon? She said, well, I called General Tompkins out at Paris Island. My mother would call anybody. And she knew General Tompkins. And she called him up, and he found out that they had sent me. And I don't know why he did all that for her, quite honestly. His daughter went to high school with me. She was a little younger. She was more like my wife's age.
Okay.
And I said, Mom, don't do that again. Just I'll keep you informed as best I can. And then I went to Vietnam. And then this is where Norman Jones, who I worked with at the courthouse for 14 years, tell everybody that we were there together that I spent my first 2 weeks in Vietnam on the golf course, which was true because I was in a bunker and sand traps at the back gate defending that's where the VC had come in through that back side. This was the latter part of the war, so it wasn't the very first of it. And they were still coming that way, and they were attacking, and they were bombing them. But the kids used to come out, the Vietnamese kids used to come out and sell us French bread. I mean, for pennies.
Yes.
You had military payment certificates. We didn't have any money, but they could take those MPC is what they call them, and they could take that somewhere, and somebody would get them American money for it or Vietnamese money for them. But the kids were really cute. It was nice having them out there, kind of added thing. But I worried about them because we would take sniper fire. You didn't know when somebody was going to shoot at you or lob a mortar shell in on you or something like that.
So scary.
That happened the first couple of weeks I was there. It was just like that every day. But
just can't imagine.
It was interesting times.
How long were you over there for?
I was there for 14 and a half months.
Okay. Wow. Yeah,
and I extended because I didn't want to come back to Beaufort in February or March. Because I got there in March, early March. And that's the coldest, wettest month of the year. Everybody be off at school, all my friends. I said, why would I come home in March? So I just gambled. I said, I took another 45 days, I guess, or something like that.
Wow.
90 days. And so I came home in May. So it worked out very well. I rented a car when I got to Columbia. And I went to pick up my future wife. She was finishing her freshman year at the university, and loaded her up and brought her home.
Oh.
And everybody was coming home from college, so I got to spend that 30-day leave I had with as many friends as I could.
Oh, that's so nice. Special.
And it was a good experience. I never had the bad experiences some of the people say when they came back from Vietnam. I'm in uniform. You get to California. I did have the sweetest thing happen to me. I'm standing there, waiting to go on the plane, and then somebody walks up behind me and says, "You all got the time?" And I'm just looking around. I'm the only one standing there. And she says, "You all," and there was a real pretty girl right behind me, "You all got the time?" And I said, "I certainly do." So it was so nice to hear a sweet voice like that in there. But I never forget that because I remember looking left and right to see who was standing there with me, and nobody was there.
Oh, my gosh.
And she said, "You all got the time."
Oh,
and,
that's so special.
Got on the plane, came back. But I never had anybody say anything derogatory about my service. And that was in 1968 when I came back. 69, I'm sorry, May of 60. So it was a period of time in my life that I grew up a good bit. Sure. And I made a number of good friends. I lost some friends over there. But the friends that I've kept up with, and I was all over the place, different units at different times. And I wasn't like an infantry guy. I was not in the infantry. So those guys were pretty tight-knit groups, and they might have been together for 7 or 8 months. Whereas I was in a radio relay site, and we set up radio sites for camps out in the field. And in the latter part of my time in the Army, I did spend a time as a helicopter door gunner, which was very exciting.
Yeah.
I had turned down flight school when I got drafted. They offer you that. And I said, "No, you're not going to get me on a helicopter." And here I am in 1968 flying helicopters. Now, I was in what they call a CH-47, which was a 2-engine helicopter. It was a cargo helicopter.
Yeah, big one.
And we would take soldiers out and drop them in the field and pick them up.
Wow.
And the sad part is you drop 30 off and you pick up 18 or 19 back. And they might have bodies with them, they might not. And but then you go in the mountains and you take food and water and things up to these guys in the mountains. And I had the coldest beer I ever had in my life. The only time I ever drank when I was working. And the guy says, "Would you like a beer?" And I said, sure. And that was the coldest beer I had. I don't know where they got the ice up there. I guess they ship it up there kind of like what we brought.
Yeah.
And one of my more interesting experiences was when we were loading up some soldiers. I saw an officer get on the helicopter. I'm the left side door gunner, and they come in from the right. And I see this guy, and he walks by me, and I said, Major Smith. He was a major. I could tell he was a major. He said, yeah, that's right. He said, who are you? And I said, well, my name is Jody Henson, and he was my company commander in basic training at Fort Gordon, Georgia. And he had gotten relieved of command for striking a recruit who was not a very nice recruit. He got in a lot of trouble, and I guess he just lost his cool with this recruit, and he slapped him. And they relieved him of his command, but he made major. I said, well, I'm glad to see that you made major and that didn't affect you, but I was there. He said, you were an E5 too? I said, yes, sir, I was. He said, how'd you get this job, door gun? I said, just lucky, I guess.
Oh, my
And
God.
he laughed at me, and he went back and sat down. But that was a great experience running to him.
Oh,
You know,
my
somebody
gosh.
that you remember that. And he was a career military man. And he told me our first sergeant had just gotten killed the week before. And it was his third tour of Vietnam.
Third
So a lot of
tour.
those career soldiers did quite a few tours over in Vietnam.
How many years of service did you do in the military?
I had 33 months.
33 months. Okay.
And the way it worked out was I was not going to make it a career.
Sure.
And reverting back to talking about Pat Conroy's books and talking to him one day, I had told him that when I was a junior in high school, my dad asked me, have you thought about college? This is the thing my wife doesn't like me to say. And I said, yes, sir, I have. He said, well, where would you like to go to college? I would like to go to the Citadel. And he looked at me and he said, why in the H would you want to go to the Citadel? I said, well, a lot of my friends are going there. And I had 4 or 5 classmates, and I knew guys that were already there.
Yeah.
It's friends that had older brothers that graduated from there. And I grew up in the military my whole life. I was pretty straight.
Yeah.
Neat room, making beds, all this good stuff, cooking. You know, I helped my mom. I wash clothes, do all that stuff. And he said, you're not going to the Citadel. And I said, do you mind if I ask you why, sir? And he said, you're not military material. It's exactly what he told me. I'll never forget it.
Oh, my gosh.
And later, when I told Pat that story, when he was signing a book that I went by, one of his newer books, he said, well, Joe, you know what? He's probably saved your life. And I hadn't even really thought about
Yeah.
that because I would have finished college in 1969, which was the heat of that time. About the time I was leaving, I had already been there. And a second lieutenant in Vietnam didn't last very long. They had a very short life expectancy, especially if you were infantry or something like that. I would have had no idea what branch of service I would have been
Sure.
in.
Right, right.
And but I had thought about flying like my dad did, but I had a hearing issue, so I wasn't going to be a pilot or anything like that. And I said, well, you know, Pat, that's probably true. Probably
Yeah,
true. But
that's-
my father, being a World War II and a Korean War veteran, I asked him long after. I never talked to him about the war, and he never talked about the war. And I finally got him to a point one day when he was working for me down in Tampa, and he was probably in his 70s then. And I had him doing some work for my company. And I asked him a few pointed questions like that. I said, do you wish you'd have been, he was a dive bomber pilot. He flew SBDs, SP-2Cs, dive bombers. He wasn't a fighter pilot. Wow. He said, the thing I learned was that I would never change anything that happened, no matter what it might have meant to me. He said, I had friends that graduated from school before me, this flight school, friends who graduated after me that didn't make it back. And whether it was Korea or World War II. And he said, I would never change anything. So I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah.
No.
Funny how life turns out.
But it was quite a life from up through that point.
Absolutely.
But Pat, well, that was pretty prophetic. I said, probably did save my life by not letting me go to the Citadel, because I know I would have buckled down there and made it in 4 years and gotten out.
Wow. Isn't it funny sometimes the way life twists and turns like that? I love it. I love it. So okay. So what, after your career in, what was it, Tampa, you moved back to Beaufort.
Right. I was with the Dun Bradstreet Corporation. And when I went back to Carolina, and Anita and I got married in 1972 when she graduated. And she got a job teaching school in Irmo, South Carolina. And I had one more year to go at Carolina. And we had one car, so she took the car to work, and I could walk to school, or a friend of mine would come by that we took classes with. As a matter of fact, it was a high school buddy of mine from Beaufort who'd gotten out of the Army at the same time I did. And he and I were high school buddies. We went to the extension together, and then we went into our military careers, short careers, and came back to there and graduated in 1973, but we'd gotten married in 62. And so we stayed there, and I went to work for the Dun Bradstreet Corporation. I had another Beaufort buddy who'd gotten out of the Army. Now, he had graduated from Georgia, went to Vietnam, and came back and got this job with this company called Dun Bradstreet. And I was familiar with the name. Most people think of Wall Street. It's not that. This is financial information is what they did. And I met his boss, and he said, yeah, when you graduate, come and interview with me, and I'll give you a job. And I said, well, how about if I just start right now? This is January. I said, I can finish school at night. I only had one semester to go. He said, no, why don't you go ahead and graduate?
Yeah.
And so as soon as I graduated, I got that job with Dun Bradstreet, and that was in 1973. And I was with them 32 years, and I was in Columbia for 10 years. I actually ended up running the South Carolina operations of Dun Bradstreet for several years before I got transferred to Charlotte to run the North Carolina operations.
Did you kind of always know in the back of your head retirement was going to be in Beaufort?
We had bought Anita's grandmother's house.
Okay.
Or Anita's mother's house in 1985. I had taken all the money I had in my little profit sharing program and put it down in that house. She was selling the house, and I had offered her, she gave me a price. I said, Abby, that's too much. And that was in 1984. And about a year later, she called me up and she said, are you still interested in my house? She was renting it out by then. She'd moved back to Mount Pleasant. And I said, sure. I said, what would you like now? And she gave me a price, and I said, no, that's a good price. And it was a good price. I mean, she was getting a good price for her house.
Yeah.
So we bought that house in 1985, and we rented it out for 17 and a half years until we came back.
Wow.
And we were very fortunate. We didn't rent it at a very high rate, so we managed to keep renters for 3 or 4 years at a time.
Yeah.
And sometimes single ladies, we did have a family in there. One time we had their first child. As a matter of fact, when we moved back and we were remodeling the house, this gentleman and a lady and a young girl, probably 10 or 12, came up and he introduced himself, and he was our renter then.
Oh.
And he said, our daughter was born when we lived in this house, and she'd like to see this house. Come on in.
That's so cool.
So special.
I don't know where they were from, where they had been living then, but they
Yeah.
had moved away.
Yeah.
And I guess they'd come back to Beaufort just to see their old stomping grounds.
That's so cool.
And that was nice.
So you knew early on if you had that house rented for 17 years, Beaufort was going to be.
Well, Anita would say, well, you know, they say you can't go back home. And I said, well, that's to live with your parents. We're not going home to live with your our parents or anything like that.
Yeah.
At that time, my mother was gone. She had died actually before Anita and I got married. But Anita's mother was still here in Beaufort. Mm-hmm. And so that was nice coming back home. And actually my sister, who had been teaching school overseas for the previous 12 years, Saudi Arabia and in Africa, Tanzania, she came back to teach back in Beaufort County, where she had taught before they went overseas.
Yeah.
And I brought my father back with me. He was not in very good health. And he didn't want to live with us, but we found a little house around the corner that we rented. And he lived there, but he only lasted about 9 months. But that was the first time we'd been together since 1964 for a Thanksgiving.
Oh,
So
that's
that was
special.
2001.
that's so special.
I mean, I wish he could have lived a little longer, but he had a good life in
Yeah.
his 80s. But that's why, and I had planned on coming back to Beaufort. And my last 5 years with Dun Bradstreet, I spent as a consultant, and I worked out of the house.
Okay.
And so that was nice. We were remodeling, and I was trying to work. Our dog would bark at the guys that came every day, even though she got to know them real well. As soon as they knocked on the door, bark, bark, bark.
Oh, of course.
And but my plan was to come back, and Anita's plan too. And like I said, and we had so many classmates that were still here. Some that came back after we did. We kind of coaxed them into coming back to Beaufort. But every time I would come back to Beaufort, and I brought a friend, they'd look at property, and Ned Brown was one of my good buddies. And I went by to see Ned. Steve and I had played tennis together when he was in high school. I was right out of high school, but we were good friends. And Ned and I would secretly meet at Taco Bell for lunch. his wife did not like him eating at Taco Bell. And he'd say, well, I said, I had a tough time getting out today, Jody. And I said, well, that's all right, Ned, you're here. And we get a couple of tacos and go. But he took our wedding pictures.
Oh, okay.
Ned did.
Oh, that is so
we had been friends
special.
from way back
That's
then.
really
too.
cool.
He was a great guy. But just so many memories, you know, and so many people you've met over the years that were Beaufortonians. I mean, I have a great picture of Ned. It was on the Beaufort magazine at one time, and he's at the helm of a sailboat. And I got him to sign that for me, and it's up in my office.
Oh,
And he was influential. And as Dr. Keisling was, Billy Keisling, you had Billy on the show.
we did.
And Dr. Keisling and I played some tennis together. I didn't know he had a tennis court till he invited me over there to play tennis on his piece of property. But they became good friends, and his wife years later. But when she was a representative, and she'd always look at me. She was always like looking me up and down. It was always kind of funny whenever I ran into her and say hello to her. And she, what are you doing now, Jody? You know.
That's too funny.
One of my favorite old time friends was a gentleman that worked at the bowling alley with me. Worked for my dad. His name was Josh. I don't know what his last name was, and he lived on Wausau Island. And I would talk to him whenever I worked at the bowling alley, and he had this gravelly voice. I mean, you know, he'd smoke big cigars, and he was just a great guy, and so much wisdom in that old man, as I called him. And my dad would give him a ride home after work because we just lived right across the Chowan Creek from there. And but it was getting to know some of those kids, and I haven't seen him for. I wonder whatever happened to Roland Washington. And Roland and I were good friends. And I've caught up with him a little bit since I've been back these 20 years, but I haven't seen him in a while, and I don't know whether he's in kind of health he's in or whatever.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
those were good memories. Those were great people.
Yeah.
And all those people influenced my life.
Yeah.
To here I am. You know, with y'all. This is really a great treat.
Well, thank you so much for
Yes,
coming on and
thank you.
sharing your specialness of Beaufort and all the things.
It's
You have some great stories.
You've lived your whole life in a wonderful town.
Thank you, Jody.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.